This is the original esport racing game. This is iRacing.
Formula One may have stopped racing at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in 2007, and they didn't return to the United States until 2012. However, through virtual technology, we can find out what a 2009 Grand Prix would have looked like at the Brickyard with round 10 of a Batteries Not Included Championship live here on the Global Sim Racing channel and the iRacing Esports Network as well, of course. Hello everyone, I'm Samuel Ryman, and alongside me in the booth is Johan van den Veld. Behind the scenes doing all of the button pushing is our director Sean Ambrose, and he's using camera sets provided by Dougie Beard. Johan, due to a couple of controversial races, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is remembered not too fondly among the Formula One community, which is a shame because, as we're hopefully about to see today, this is a good old-fashioned racetrack that can produce some entertaining racing.
Absolutely, Sam, and that started all the way back in 1909. Indianapolis became then the second purpose-built banked oval in the world and was the first track ever to be called a speedway. And deservingly so, if I may add, because Indianapolis fits enough seats to host a population of countries like Iceland and Greenland combined. Now, even though the history of Indianapolis is over 100 years old, the track is from the last few decades. In 2000, an F1 approved infield road course was completed, stretching 4.2 kilometers and utilizing a part of the oval. Now personally, that's the part of the track that I like the most, as it divides the track into two unique halves: a tricky, twisty infield section where overtaking is usually quite hard, and a long oval section where you want as little wing and as much speed as possible. It's an interesting track for sure, and to see how that looks like from on board the car, let's join the GSRC FW31 for a lap around Indianapolis.
Alright, we've got Scott Newton and the GSRC Williams, so let's do a lap around Indianapolis. Down the front stretch, this is by far the fastest part of the circuit. With the heavy braking into turn 1, this is going to be the most popular spot to get a pass done. But this little chicane is slow enough that it requires some throttle modulation, and the overeager might find themselves facing the wrong way. Up into 4, it's an awkward entry, making overtakes difficult. You'll blast through the kink of 5, and then you've got the patience try in turn 6. The unique thing about this hairpin is that you'll stay hugged tight to the inside to give yourself a better run onto the backstretch. But anyone who gets greedy and lets it swing out past the track boundaries will suffer a slowdown penalty. While you might sometimes see pass attempts down into 8, it's a swifter corner than you'd expect. This set of S's also tightens as you go, meaning staying on the racing line will be important to your lap time. Eventually, you'll reach the most critical corner of the track, turn 11. You won't be lifting from here to the line, so a good exit winds up having a big effect not just on your lap, but whether you can attack or defend. You don't even have to swing out wide to carry your speed through here. It's all about shortening the distance through the final bank turn by staying right down to the inside. But hopefully, if you've kept it all together, you've now finished a lap around Indianapolis.
Alright, well that's what one lap around the circuit is like. We're about to see for the 8 in just a little moment here on GSRC and the iRacing Esports Network. And if you haven't subscribed to those guys already, be sure to do so. Lots of multiple different championships going on throughout the year. Of course, the NASCAR Peak Auto Pro Championship just started off earlier this week. They had their Daytona 500 season opening event. Fun to watch, and plenty more races left to come throughout the season. But right now, Johan, we're getting ready for this one at Indianapolis.
Yeah, absolutely. This is round 10 of our 12-round Batteries Not Included Championship, like you mentioned before, Sam. There's 4 watermarks after that line in the race details, and that means one thing: there's 4 drop weeks this championship. In other words, the 4 worst results of each driver will be removed from the championship battle. The race length today, however, at Indy is 48 laps, and the setups for the drivers are open, with a limited fuel tank. They run with a 67% fuel tank, which roughly means that each driver has to make at least one stop during the race. There's no incident cap, but the admins will keep an eye on it, drivers not abusing it around here. And the points are official iRacing points, so that basically means that they look at how many drivers are and the strength of field of the field here. But the SOF of the 9 drivers that we have is 22,091. With only 9 drivers, the gaps will be big between the drivers, Sam, but also that means that the winner today will not get as many points as they did the last few rounds.
In clarification, that's the 2019 eNASCAR Peak Antifreeze series that was starting last weekend. I just wanted to clarify that. Alright, so let's take a look at our championship standings after 9 rounds of this 12-round season. These drivers will all get 4 drop weeks, and here in these points that we've simulated, we have counted for those 4 drop weeks, and as a result, Mark Usher, who has pretty much been dominant in every single race he showed up in, is leading by 52 markers over Thomas Ziegler. But after Ziegler gets very close, Scott Newton only 4 points behind him. Clayton McLeod is always up there fighting for podium positions, so definitely don't count him out. And Neil Andrews also has proven to be very fast in the past. In fact, one of the only drivers that has shown that he's really had the pace to challenge Usher in these 2009 Formula One cars. So we'll see how that goes in our final 3 rounds, beginning with today's race at Indianapolis. Just 2 races left to go after today. Usher is here today, Andrews is not, McLeod is, Scott Newton is, and I'm not seeing Thomas Ziegler, which is a surprise. He's normally a consistent name to show up. Practice is over. We are 2 minutes into our qualifying session, and in fact, the first times are just starting to click off.
Yeah, we can see Clayton McLeod just going purple with a 107.1. But what you mentioned, Sam, the Thomas Ziegler is not here. That's actually, well, maybe the biggest piece of news before the race actually starts, because Thomas Ziegler was in contention for the championship lead basically the whole season because of his consistency, because he was always there every race. He didn't win so far, but he just consistently showed up and also basically on the podium every race he participated in. This drop lead will certainly make him probably the victim of an overtaking in the championship by Scott Newton and Mark Usher behind him. In the meantime, Reed Miller is one of the drivers that will probably pop in. He is there while Neil Andrews isn't. Scott Newton we just see on track. He spun it around. He already is P2 though with a 107.6. Scrap that, he's P3 because Mark Usher just went purple. You can see it up top of the screen there. A 107.0, very quick lap time, especially compared to his practice time. In practice, Mark only managed to 108.1. In qualifying, he's 1.1 seconds quicker.
Yeah, it's an indication maybe Usher hadn't really attempted the qualifying run during practice. Now, the fastest driver in practice was Scott Newton, who we saw just have a spin a little moment ago. If Scott Newton was able to replicate his his practice time in this qualifying session, it would edge out Usher right now. However, Usher is still on track. There you see him trying to improve on his time. And he only needs to find a few thousandths of a second to set the fastest time of the session, of the weekend, whatever you want to call it. Basically, to go faster than Scott Newton's practice time. Let's see if he's able to do that this lap. Coming through the final turn, hugging that wall, 190 miles an hour across the line. And he does. He goes into the 106s, the first driver to do that.
Incredible lap time from Mark Usher. Also incredible driving line. You can see all the drivers there on screen. Scott Newton take a wide line through the last corner of the track. As Scott Newton actually once again comes to a halt after turn 1. He resets his car. But all the drivers opting for a wide line through the only banked corner of the track. Mark Usher, however, keeps it completely hugged to the inside. And you can see that it actually makes quite a bit of difference. 2/10 quicker than he was the lap before. We're now on board with Erwan Woudstra, one of the new names in this series. He's currently sitting in P5, a 108.0 so far. He's just starting a new qualifying lap. He's using a little bit of draft of a car in front. I didn't see who that was exactly. Erwan is one of the new names, as I mentioned. In practice, well, he was right in the middle of the field. P5 out of 9 drivers. He's still sitting there in qualifying. However, he went 1.1 seconds quicker as well compared to practice. I would almost suggest, Sam, that Erwan as well didn't use a qualifying setup in practice. He is now finding out how this car behaves on the light fuel load.
Having a bit of a technical glitch at the top of the screen there where our third place name isn't showing up. However, that third place name is a relatively new name to the series, I believe. It's Chris Moretta in a 150 car. He's not on track now, but currently Chris Moretta sitting third fastest with a 107.2. So maybe the driver of that number 150 machine will be a driver to keep an eye on when this race starts in about 4 minutes' time.
Well, that was really something that we were seeing in practice. You could basically divide the field in two parts. The top four, the top five. The top four consists out of Usher, McLeod, Scott Newton and the new driver of Chris Moretta. Those four drivers were really distancing themselves from the rest of the field, with Erwan Boutstra being a little bit the best of the rest in P5. So any of those four drivers that are named, well, I think are prime potential inhabitants of a podium position here. Scott Newton, of course, always is one of the people that you would write down for a possible podium position. He's currently going through the last few corners. This is one of his quick laps, though. This is for a quick lap time as he's coming through the final corner of the infield. Let's see what kind of driving line he takes through this oval section. If he does the same thing as Mark Asher did last time around, he keeps it hugged on the inside. Yeah, he actually tracks out a little bit more than Mark Asher did. Coming across the start-finish line, a 1:07.0, almost as quick as his practice time, sets him to P2, but still 1.5 of a second short to Mark Asher's time.
That bumps Clayton McLeod down to third and Chris Moretta down to fourth. Clayton McLeod actually rolling out of the pits for one final qualifying attempt as we speak, as we enter the closing moments of qualifying. Couple of minutes left in the session. When the checkered flag does fly, the drivers will still have time to complete the lap time they are on, just like they do in the real world. So currently, your qualifying order is Mark Usher ahead of Scott Newton, Clayton McLeod, Chris Moretta, Erwan Roostra, Marcus Gresdal, Reed Miller, Chris Bean and Fabiano Lima. With 2 minutes left to go before the checkered flag falls on qualifying, let's see if anyone else can bump themselves up a couple of positions.
Yeah, and I was mentioning basically that the field was split in two parts, the top four, top five. Looking at how qualifying stands, I would almost say there's a top five with Erwan Boutstra putting himself in that group of drivers. He's currently only 0.8 of a second behind pole sitter Mark Asher. And the gap between him and Marcus Gresdal is actually quite significant. 0.8 between Erwan Boutstra P5 and Gresdal in P6 as well. So I will cut off the point there for the top half of the field and the bottom half of the field. We're looking at on board with Erwan Boutstra at the moment. He is coming through the final infield corner now on the back straight onto the oval. This is one of his quick lap times. He had a 1:07.6 as his quick lap time. Look at the wide line he's taking through the oval. I almost say, Sam, that he's setting himself up for a new lap there.
Yeah, definitely not the desired line through there, but he can get a better run off of a corner, build up some momentum. You mentioned Marcus Gresdal a little ways off of the top five. However, I think he's definitely still going to be worth keeping an eye on at the start. Marcus Gresdal has been one of those drivers we've seen throughout the season who has been quite good at starts, and they do have a decent run down into the first corner here. And let's not forget that Formula One history, when it comes to turn one here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, it's not always the cleanest opening sequence of corners.
No, absolutely not. All those drivers will get bunched up completely together at that very sharp 90-degree right-hander. They have a lot of speed they can build up before they start and before they have to brake. So almost like a Monza-like scenario where all the cars just concentrated together, fighting for a very small amount of space. That will certainly be something to keep an eye on. A lot of potential there for disaster. We're currently on board with Chris Moretta. That was the driver that we were mentioning earlier in the broadcast. He's currently sitting in P4 with a 1:07.2. Coming across the start-finish line, will he actually go quicker? No, this was his out lap, I see, so he will not go quicker yet. Also with the finish flag out, I don't think that he will get another opportunity to put in a quick lap.
He's got enough time to do it if he made it. You see that countdown clock in the top left now is the countdown until the session officially ends. and we advance to the race session and get them all gridded up, ready to go for 48 laps here. So, who's still on track? Clayton McLeod, Scott Newton, Erwin Woodstra was, but he just spun off, and Chris Moretta is out there as well. And here comes McLeod, who'll be the first one of those out of the final turn. Let's see if he can go faster. I think by only 1,000th or two, so that's not going to improve. Scott Newton practicing pit entry, and Chris Moretta is off a pace. So that's going to wrap it up for qualifying. Let's go ahead and read out your starting grid. It'll be Mark Usher starting from pole position, always a dangerous combination. However, Scott Newton starting second, has been getting very good at starts recently, so who knows who could lead into the first corner. Clayton McLeod will be starting from third position, and row number 2 is reserved for those with CM initials, because Chris Moretta will be starting from fourth.
P5 is the debut driver of Erwan Woudstra. He starts on the inside of Marcus Gestal in P6. Reed Miller, we talked about him. He's a potential driver to move up in the top 5 of the championship if he gets a good result here. He starts the race in P7, just in front of Chris Bean. In the last row of the grid, in the last position of the grid, we can find Fabiano Lima. He starts the race in P9.
So the cars are now getting gridded up. Fortunately, with only 9 cars here today, it means it shouldn't take them that long to get up here on the starting line. And got a full crowd of virtual fans here to watch all the action in front of them at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Round number 10 of the Batteries Not Included Championship. Next week will be round number 11. We will be racing at Le Mans over in France. Now be sure to tune in for that as well. These drivers ain't worried about Le Mans right now, though. They're worried about today's race, and they know it could be critical to get a great start here. All the cars on the grid. Mark Usher is on the far side, over towards the outside wall. He is on pole. Scott Newton now has gotten great starts recently. Can he get another one? The lights are off, and away they go. And no, Scott Newton does not get a good start at all. He's going to be threatened for second, maybe even third. Mark Usher has a track to himself. He should lead into the first corner, but pressure from behind. Mark Usher makes it through turn 1 and has contact for second.
Chris Moretta had a great start, but he hit Clayton McLeod there on the inside. Both cars having a little half spin. They have to continue. Chris Moretta, hard contact between him and Marcus Gestal there. Both cars into the gravel. Let's see if they can continue there. Mark Usher, however, he is loose. He is still driving away from Clayton McLeod, from Scott Newton, who inherited P3, Erwan Woudstra P4, Chris Bean all the way from P8 to P5. He gained a ton of positions with that. Reed Miller is sitting behind him P6.
Marcus Gresdor has had to take a tow to the pits, but the rest of the field already a little bit of distance between them, but it's early stages here. Some big movers, some big losers on the opening lap here. We'll see if we have any comers or goers throughout the race as they try and regain those positions. Mark Usher hugging the inside line through the turn 1 on the oval course. He's going to come across the lead lap number 1, and his lead stands already at over a second.
Yeah, and the problem for Clayton McLeod is he needs to close down the gap a little bit in the infield section, so he can actually use the draft and catch Mark Usher once they reach the oval. It's actually quite a big task, however, to close down Mark Usher, the driver that has participated in 5 races this season and won all 5 of them. He's really on a row, and also once again here at Indianapolis he is leading the field. Good for Clayton McLeod as he's leading towards Erwan Woudstra, who got P3. Scott Newton lost a position. He is now trying to chase down the Dutch driver for the final podium position.
Alright, well let's get a replay of that start action here and get an idea of how it's all shaken out the way it has right now. It was Mark Usher on pole position. Scott Newton, that's the dark blue car on the outside, did not get off to a great start. Sorry, that was actually Clayton McLeod there in the dark blue car. And then Chris Moretta just contact back further in the field. And let's get another look at that.
And if we go on board with Chris Moretta in the contest, you can see it there. He completely overshoots that corner. Well, Marcus Gesels, we back it up a little bit in that replay to see more from the outside what happened with Chris Moretti. You can see him there having a little contact with Clayton McLeod, but in the next corner, completely overshooting it there. And Marcus Gesels on the outside had a great run. Didn't expect Chris Moretti there. Just got taken out, and luckily for Chris, he can spin his car around, continue. But the Scandinavian driver is still sitting in the pits to repair his car.
Well, now it's showing Chris Moretti all of a sudden in 6th. I saw him got 7th from Fabio Lima. Where's that other position came from? We are missing Chris Bean. Chris Bean has had an off or spin just a couple moments ago. Has dropped him back from 5th to 8th.
And that's a shame for Chris Bean. We go to a replay of that. He was having a great run. You already see him there standing still in the gravel. We'll go a little bit further so we can see. He was being chased down by Reed Miller behind him, and maybe the pressure got too much there in that 180-degree corner, just braking a little bit too late, spinning it around. Now, like I said, big shame for Chris Bean. He was having a great run, actually working his way up the top half of the grid. Now he basically is driving in the position he started in. He's 3 seconds behind Chris Moretta, who's actually chasing down Fabiano Lima. They're very close together, this battle for P7. Basically nose to tail at this point as they join the infield section. And this is not a place on the track where it's easy to make an overtake. Fabiano Lima overshooting the corners quite severely there. That will not help him here. This in the infield section is basically the only place that you can make an overtake. You need a good run there, and Chris Moretta seems to have it right in the gearbox there. Using the draft a little bit, but still it's slightly too far away. He takes a look at the inside. Late dive there from Chris Moretta. You would imagine that after the problems that he had in the opening lap, he would take it a little bit calmer. He's putting a lot of pressure on Fabiano Lima. Now coming out of the infield section, this is one of the best overtaking opportunities you have. It's almost 2 kilometers.
Side-by-side battle for 3rd place. Going into the first corner, Scott Newton got a good run on Erwin Wujka. Makes the pass stick on the inside, and Newton is up into 3rd place. So this has been building for a little while. Wujka gained spots at the start. Newton lost spots at the start, and this is basically Newton's comeback. And then as we continue on this replay, we'll jump back to 6th place, because pretty much we saw an identically executed pass from Chris Moretta to get the position from Fabiano Lima. And this is actually the second time Moretta has gotten by Lima. He must have had a mistake at some point, because he had already passed Lima and then just had to pass him again. So now the top 2 remains the same, Usher and McLeod. Newton is up into 3rd place, and he is not far behind Clayton McLeod and eating up about a second a lap. So we could see a battle for 2nd very shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. He's closing on the gap. The gap between them is also not that big, but Mark Usher, he's really profiting from all the mayhem that happened at the start. You can see it on top of the screen. The gap between him and Clayton McLeod is over 4 seconds now. Mark Usher, well, he's roughly the quickest driver on the grid. Basically, his speed and the speed of Scott Newton are the same. So he's not being hauled in by any driver at this point. And he can just consolidate the lead that he has now. But Scott Newton, well, he has to focus on Clayton McLeod, the Canadian, in front of him first. As they're going through the final few corners of that infield section, you can see them swing across there. Out of the final corner of the infield section onto the oval. Scott Newton is probably close enough, I would imagine, though. If we jump back 1 position to them, you can see on board with Scott Newton, right in the draft of Clayton McLeod. Now this is really the point where you start noticing that draft getting quicker and quicker. 314 against 304 kilometers an hour. Taking a look on the inside, and just like he was doing with Aaron Woutska last time around, Scott Newton gets another position. That's the Australian back to P2.
And that lap was a 1/10 of a second faster than Mark Usher, probably helped by the slipstream, but Scott Newton definitely Having to make Mark Usher think, I would say. Usher can't exactly relax, even though he has a 5-second lead. We've got a lot of racing still to go ahead of us. Honestly, I'd say this is one of the longer races of the season at 48 laps around this circuit, taking a little under a minute and 10 to click off a lap. Not a whole lot of cars out there, let's be honest. However, plenty of passes on the opening couple of laps, and drivers trying to get back into the positions that they feel they deserve. It looks like all 8 of our cars that are still out there, despite the early contact and spins, are racing without any damage so far. And then they've got to be careful though as the run goes on and the tyres get warm, because especially around the oval portion of a circuit, the walls aren't too far away here. If they do make a mistake, hitting the wall at 180 miles an hour won't end well.
One driver whose race didn't end well is Marcus Gestel. He threw the towel in the ring, and he's our first retiree of today after that lap 1 turn 3 contact that he had with Chris Moretta. Chris Moretta in the meantime is still driving in P6. He overtook Chris Bean after his spin and Fabiella Lima with that move down turn 1. He's closing down the gap, however, to Reed Miller. The gap between those two drivers is, well, around 2.1 seconds at this point of the race. Looking at the speed last time around, Chris Moretta was over a second quicker than Reed Miller in front of him. So that gap is being closed down very, very quickly. Reed Miller gaining 2 positions since the start of the race. He's driving around in P5.
Yeah, you mentioned it in qualifying, Johan, how we had 2 kinds of paces going on here. The top 4 have over about 15 seconds to Reed Miller in 5th place. Owen Wooster has earned his spot up in that top 4 by avoiding all the chaos early on. Chris Moretta would love to join in that battle later on, but he's made a couple mistakes early, and the penalty is he's currently running down in 6th place. Although I have a feeling within the next couple of laps he'll be closer to Miller, especially as Reed Miller just overshot turn 1 there, and that's going to cost him some time.
Yeah, absolutely, that will make the work for Chris Moretta only more easier. I was actually looking at the times of Chris Moretta compared to people like Evan Bouts, Clayton McLeod. Chris Moretta is quite a bit slower at this point of the race. I wouldn't be surprised, Sam, if after that lap 1 he actually has some damage on his car. That doesn't allow him to be as quick as the other rivals are, because in qualifying he was quicker than Erwan, almost the same pace as Clayton McLeod, but on race fuel he cannot make that pace work for him yet.
However, he is definitely closing in right now, and Chris Bean, who had some early troubles, he's pulling into the pits. It's too early to be a scheduled pit stop, so we'll see if he'll be able to get back out there. All these drivers will have to take a scheduled stop late on. They can make passes there, or they can make passes on the track. Is that what we're about to see for 5th place? Because Chris Moretta has a nice run on Reed Miller. I think he's a little bit too far back. He closes up in the braking zone, though, and maybe he'll be able to make something happen on the back straight.
Going into the infield section, can take a look around on the inside now. Doesn't do it this time around. He chooses the better of it. Reed Miller stays in front. He has a good run out of turn 4 there. Can take a look at this long left-hander. Both drivers not hitting the apex, or a very late apex there, giving up the corner to get a good run out of here. It's Chris Moretta a little bit more tight than Reed Miller in front of him, but he doesn't have the momentum to try and move on the left-hander now. This will be a quick succession of corners, left, right, before they hit the oval section. And actually, Chris Moretta is losing a little bit of connection here to Reed Miller in the draft, in the aero push. He's really struggling with it. Going onto the oval, the gap between these two drivers, once they reach that point, is around 0.7 of a second, and that's quite a bit. Now, maybe Chris Moretta has a different setup, a lot less wing that allows him to have a higher speed here. Look at the distance between the two drivers. Chris Moretta cannot close him down. And wow, looking at how they were 1 lap ago, Sam, I was really expecting an overtake from Chris Moretta there, but he actually lost quite a bit of time.
It could be that damage to his car you were talking about. Maybe there is some damage to that number 150 machine that's hurting him in the aero wake there towards the end of a lap, where there's several more corners, because he's able to close right up on Reed Miller here. And coming out of the next right-hander, they will enter an overtaking zone, but I wouldn't say he's in striking range as long as Miller's able to get the power down okay, and he is. Worth noting, we are down to 7 cars. Chris Bean did not bring it back out onto the track. Instead, he took it to the garage. So Chris Bean and Marcus Dresdel already out of this race. We continue to keep our eyes on this battle for 5th place. Once again, they're coming out towards the front straight. Moretta able to keep touch with Miller a bit better. Let's see if he can make anything happen down into turn 1 this lap around.
Yeah, to quantify that, he was 0.2 of a second closer out of the infield than he was last time around. You can see that on track immediately. The draft is a lot stronger as they reach turn 1. He can take a look on the inside. Reed Miller is still in front. He doesn't defend. And Chris Moretta, once he fends off to the inside, he brakes actually a lot earlier than Reed does. That squanders that opportunity that he had. He once again has to follow through the infield section. Now this few set of corners that they're passing through now, it almost seems like Chris Moretta has the advantage there. But once they reach this long left-hander, the last few laps it seems like Reed Miller has the pace, or at least the driving line, to create big enough of a gap to leave Chris Moretta behind him. Chris Moretta having a little wiggle there as he reaches the apex. Clubbers the curbstone a little bit too hard. Now that at least means that he cannot try and move here, and he needs to close down through this couple of corners, this left-right handers, to give himself another opportunity going into turn 1. Through here now we're looking back through Reed Miller and through the rear wing. You can see that the car is not close enough. Coming out of the corner this time around, once again it's 0.7 of a second, so 0.2 further away than they were last time around. And you can see how small actually the car of Chris Moretta is becoming if you look back. That's way too far to try and move going into the first one.
Keep an eye on this battle, but at the same time it's worth noting that Erwin Woodstra has actually been reeling in Clayton McLeod a little bit for 3rd place. He's not within striking range yet, he's still about 1.5 seconds back, but Clayton McLeod not exactly safe in the bronze position right now.
And did you see that moment that Erwin just had coming out of that corner? Going onto the backstraight, let's actually replay that, because the Benelux driver was extremely lucky to not squander all the positions in the time that he had gained so far in the race. Look at him. He's trying to find the right moment, but he was going through that couple of corners in the infield section. He got very loose. Oh, we actually find it here. Look at the white line he has, and once he gets on the power, his tires just completely give out. Complete opposite lock, trying to save it. Great save, however, from him. And he got it back going again, but that meant that the gap between him and Clayton McLeod immediately grew with quite a bit. Erwin only did 1:09.3 last time around. Clayton McLeod at 1:08.7 at 0.6 of a second.
And Moretta has a good run on Miller for 5th place. Is he going to take a look down the inside of turn 1 again? He has a run. He has the inside line, and this time Miller will yield it. Moretta picks him off and takes 5th position.
Yeah, Moretta is lucky there that we don't have flat spots in the surface yet, because the way he slowed down that car on turn 1 really would have hurt his tire. Big black line there of where he braked his car, but he got the position done in the end. Got that pass on Reed Miller. Now Reed Miller doesn't have anything to fear from Fabiano Lima behind him. He is around half a second per lap quicker. He will slowly distance himself from him. In the meantime, Chris Moretta, he will look to the car in front of him of Erwin Woudstra, but the gap between those two drivers is already 22 seconds.
Yeah, it will be interesting keeping an eye on Moretta's lap times now that he has clean air, seeing how fast he can go. But unquestionably now, the tightest battle on the circuit becomes Clayton McLeod to Erwin Woudstra. Although it sits at about 1.5 seconds right now, it's pretty stable there for 3rd and 4th place. And maybe this is something where Erwin might be thinking strategy, maybe trying to save his car for the long run and make something happen during the final 33 laps of this race, and one pit stop that all these drivers are going to have to do.
Last time around, Erwin won a few tenths of a second, 0.6 of a second to the Canadian. In the meantime, the gap between Clayton McLeod and Scott Newton is just growing every lap. Last time around, 0.8 of a second between them. The gap between Scott and Clayton has grown to 4.7 seconds. In the meantime, Mark Usher as well is just driving away from Scott Newton. Not by a big margin, a few tenths per lap. Actually, this time around, it is Scott Newton with the quickest lap of the race, actually. You can see it on top of the screen, a 1:07.7, so scrap what I was just saying. The story of the race, the trend of the race was that Mark Asher was slightly quicker, although Scott Newton seems to have found a little bit of pace, and he has brought down the gap back to under 5 seconds.
Yeah, it's been hovering around 5 seconds for the past several laps. It seems Newton has a good lap every now and then that's able to keep him within striking range of Usher, or at least keep Usher honest up there at only 4.5 seconds up the road. Lap traffic could become a factor later on. It won't be a huge factor. There's plenty of overtaking opportunities around here. It's a wide circuit and there's only 7 cars, and Fabiano Lima down at 7th, even 15 laps in this race, is only 45 seconds behind our race leaders. All of them have a relatively good pace out there as we do a lap on board Scott Newton right now and get an idea of what it is to race around the brickyard. And it's not a very good lap. You can see at the top of your screen the gap has grown to over 5 seconds again.
The gap has been diminishing in the battle for P3 and P4. Clayton McLeod is being chased down quite quickly by Aaron Woudstra. The Dutch driver has his eyes on the podium position. He's actually quite close to the Canadian at this point of the race. The gap between them going over the start-finish line was only 0.4 of a second. This infield section has grown a tenth, but Aaron Woudstra is close enough to try and move going into turn 1 if he doesn't lose too much time in the infield section. You need a good move here, different driving lines. You can see Aaron Woudstra really giving up the exit of the corner there to get a good entry. In the end, it doesn't cost him that much though. He roughly stays around where he was going into the corner to Clayton McLeod. So again, different driving lines there. Giving up the corner, Aaron Woudstra, to get a good run through the chicane, and that helps him as they come out of the infield here. A little bit more conservative, Woudstra is behind him. Clayton McLeod winning a few car lengths. Going out of this section though, the gap between them is 0.5 of a second. There was enough for Chris Moretta in the battle with Reed Miller. Isn't enough for Aaron Woudstra. Coming through the oval corner, the bank corner, into the drafts. It doesn't seem like Aaron has the overdrive, the extra momentum that he needs. He's 6 kilometers an hour quicker, but that's not quick enough to put his car side by side, and he has to try it another time next lap.
So follow him around on lap 18 or 48 here, with Clayton McLeod still holding on to 3rd place ahead of Erwin Woudstra. And once again, they're coming up to a good passing opportunity when they come out of the next turn. The right-hander down on by the back straight. Woudstra would have to get a good run out of turn because he throws in a bit too deep, and Clayton McLeod's able to get a much nicer run on down the back straight and maintain that gap. Now, when they come out to the oval section, of course, maybe their different setups could be affecting their top speed there. You mentioned even though Woudstra had the slipstream of Clayton McLeod, he appeared to be slower. Maybe that's an indication that McLeod is running a lot lower downforce on his cars. However, Clayton McLeod, being a league admin, he always shares these setups with his competitors, so they all know what he's got. Now, some of them, of course, may opt to run different setups if they don't exactly like the handling of what's under the chassis of that number 1 machine. But it's working for Clayton McLeod, that's for sure. Currently running in 3rd position right now as we approach the halfway point of round 10 here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the Batteries Not Included Championship.
And it seems like everyone is just not having the... Clayton
Clayton really lit them up coming out the final turn. I said the setup was working for him. He almost went off the track. I think he'll get away with this one though, where when Woudstra wasn't really close enough to capitalise, but this could have been bad.
We got on board and just look at all the smoke coming. Oh, wow, very loose there. Luckily for Clayton, he can continue, but if we go back live, look at the gap between him and Woudstra. It has completely diminished, only 0.5 of a second once again as they come out of the infield section.
Let's see.
Out of the infield section, it doesn't seem like Woudstra has the drive that Clayton McLeod has. It seems like at some points of the track, Clayton McLeod just has the better driving line. That's going into turn 7, the corner leading onto the back straight, and also turn 11, the corner leading onto the front straight. And both those corners are extremely important because those are basically the only 2 opportunities that you have to overtake. But Clayton McLeod is so strong there that every time, even though maybe he's not as quick over the whole lap, he is quick enough to defend himself for the driver behind.
Well, those are two good passing opportunities, but of course, as is always the case in Formula 1, the best overtaking opportunity is that thing called pit road. And the pit window is definitely open now for these drivers. Let's take a quick look at the weather conditions. We haven't really mentioned that today, and the reason I want to do that is because as we're deep into the run now, you'll notice the tyres have got their work cut out for them. It's quite a hot track temperature here today, and there's also a lot of wind that these drivers and these cars are having to fight, so it might not exactly be the nicest track to tyres today, and Michelin can tell you all about that.
Absolutely there, with 103 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 39 degrees Celsius track temperature. The drivers were already telling in practice that the track temperature is very, very hot here. Now, one thing to mention though is that it is currently 5 p.m. virtual time in the game. So the sun is getting down and down. That means that also the track is getting slightly cooler with every minute that passes. So that will help the tires a little bit as the race goes forward. Clayton McLeod still is fending off Erwan Woutrstra. Now, looking at the lap times of Erwan, it almost seems like the 2-3 laps ago he had a little negative dip. He was almost 8/10 of a second slower than he was consistently laps before that. Now, however, you can see it on track. He has found his rhythm and his pace again. He's right on the rear of Clayton McLeod as they're going through turn 9, turn 11, turn 10, going towards turn 11. Oh, as Erwan Woutrstra has a lot of wheel spin there, trying to get a good exit out of that corner. That was a little bit too greedy on the throttle. And that's a small commentator's curse. Yeah, that's a small trip through the grass from him. And all that time that he gained, all that momentum that he had to set himself up for an overtaking maneuver, is squandered there.
Yeah, I'd also noticed a couple of moments earlier on in that lap when Woodster had actually been blinking, which is an indication.
Sorry, Scott Newton is off. Scott Newton has spun around and he's stuck, it seems like. It seems like he's stuck on the exit of turn 2, that is.
And this is absolutely huge because he had a very solid race going on in second place. He had a clear 12 seconds over Clayton McLeod. He's not going to be able to get away with that. It's early on in the lap. So he definitely doesn't want to tow, but that might be his only option, and that's what he's going to have to do. This is going to be a very long tow to get all the way back around to pit road. And now, the good news, if there's any good news to come out of this, is this should be able to serve as his scheduled pit stop, but he's definitely not going to be able to finish on the podium now.
We're seeing the replay of that incident there. He just clubbed at the curbstone on the inside of turn 1 a little bit too hard. Car got loose, unstabilized, and that spun it around. Now, this is a really rough moment for Scott Newton that he cannot get away there. Rear wheels just spinning around and not finding the traction that he needs to get out of the gravel trap. Unlucky for Scott Newton, that means that he will be sent back to P7. He is serving his pit stop, like you mentioned, Sam, at the same time as he is his tow. But with the point that he was in the track, I think that this is a tow of 2-3 minutes maybe. So once he gets going again, I wouldn't be surprised if the Australian has actually maybe 1, maybe even 2 laps down to Mark Asher.
Yeah, well, Scott Newton, he'll be tired of comeback drives. He had one at Donington last week. He finished second place there after running into some early trouble. I don't think he'll be as lucky today, but he's about to be joined in the pits by Mark Usher, who has absolutely no pressure from behind now with Scott Newton out of the picture, and he is coming in for his pit stop.
Yeah, coming across, stands packed on both sides of Mark Usher now. We're having a good view of the pit stop when it happens. In front of them, Scott Newton is still standing still. Clayton McLeod and Erwan Woutrstra are screaming by. They go to the lead in P2 virtually of the race until they have to make their pit stop. Mark Usher is up on the jack. Tires are new. Fuel gets added. He is waiting and now he gets going again. Very short run to the exit of the pits. Now he is coming out basically in no man's land. Chris Moretta is coming towards him, but he's still way too far to threaten him for a position. So Mark Usher can in all calmness now warm up his tires again, get back into that rhythm and really consolidate this race, because with Scott Newton spinning there, the gap between Mark Usher and Clayton McLeod was over 17 seconds. And it seems like Mark Usher once again is on his way for his 6th victory of the season.
He's not leading right now. The race leader right now is Clayton McLeod, and even if they're not racing for the overall win, I have a feeling Erwin Woodström would at least like to say he's led part of this race. He's definitely close enough that if he had the setup, he could pull the move off of Clayton McLeod here, but I just don't think he has a setup. He's in striking range, he's got a nice run. You can see the slipstreams helping him close in on McLeod a little bit, but it's just not enough.
And we could just see, by the way, as well, in the background, Scott Newton is back on track. He's now 1 lap down, but he's back at it going again. Now, Erwin Woutrstra actually had the best lap of the race 3 laps in a row. His personal best lap of the race 3 laps in a row. So he's really finding the momentum, finding the rhythm that he needs. And as I'm saying that, he actually gets loose on the curb zone there. Too much curb zone, too greedy, trying to follow Clayton McLeod. He gets passed by Scott Newton. He loses a lot of time there. I wouldn't be surprised to see Erwin actually go to the pits now to get rid of those very warm tires, refuel his car.
Speaking of the pits, that's where Chris Moretta is right now. He's been running in 4th position, not too far ahead of Reed Miller, it must be said. We saw him pass Miller early on in the race, but hasn't been able to pull out leaps and bounds over him.
Erwin Woutrstra is coming in, as I said. He's currently now braking to put it there on the pit limit. It's a very difficult pit entry, of course. Reminds me a little bit of how Monza looks. As you're coming through the parabolica, of course, at Monza full speed. And then you have a very narrow window where you have to step on the brakes and get your car slowed down. If you're even a meter too late, you really hurt it here. It's not like other pits like a Mid-Ohio, to say, a track where you have a little chicane to set yourself up for. Now this is just full speed to pit speed, and that makes it quite tricky to get slowed down on time. And Woutrstra now up the jacks, getting those hot tires away from his car, some new fuel in, gets it going again. Now he gets overtaken maybe by Reed Miller, who's coming over start finish now side by side, and I think Reed Miller just had some there. You could see it there on the wide screen on the outside. Reed Miller gets by, but of course Reed still has to make a pit stop. And Woutrstra is done for today, visiting his crew.
Talking about the pit road here at Indianapolis, obviously because it's a virtual world, they can use those NASCAR and IndyCar pit stalls on this side of the pit wall. When Formula 1 raced in real life, they still had refueling, so they would have to take them behind those walls and connect them up to all of the equipment over towards the garages. Meanwhile, though, we're watching this battle. That's not an overall battle, but still could be a battle for inconveniencing your competitors, where Reed Miller is in 4th place, Chris Moretta is in 5th place. Miller still has to make a stop, and not Chris Moretta, this is Erwin Woodström. Moretta is the driver that Miller will be racing after his pit stop, and Miller comes in now. Moretta should easily be ahead of Miller once his pit stop is made, but we'll see what gathers.
We'll see what happens, but we could see on screen there Erwin Woutrstra with a very nasty wobble coming out of the infield section, almost losing his car there as he was trying to get a good run out of that corner to try and get Reed Miller going into turn 1. Now luckily for him, Reed Miller went into the pits. He's currently there now. He's following Fabiano Lima. He's out again, but he also went into the pits last time around. Chris Moretta is going by Reed Miller now. There, he passes him. So Chris Moretta is back to P4. Reed Miller is relegated 1 position. He's currently driving P5.
Now, even though Reed Miller just saw Scott Newton go by him on the front straight, that's not 4 position, because unfortunately for Newton, he's 2 laps down. So Scott Newton's still stuck in 7th place right now. And unfortunately for Newton, even though we started with a small field to begin with, there hasn't been a heck of a lot of attrition in this one. Just 2 cars out of race, Chris Bean and Marcus Gresdal. So Newton might not be able to do a whole lot better than 7th unless this race really changes picture in these closing 20 laps.
Yeah, and the problem for Scott Newton is that he's 2 laps down. The driver in front, Fabiano Lima, is 1 lap down. Now, looking at the distance between those 2 drivers, I think there's around 40 seconds between Fabiano Lima and Scott Newton, 48 seconds to be exact. Now, the good news for Scott Newton is he's winning around 2 seconds per lap on Fabiano Lima. With 20 laps to go, that's just not enough to get P6 away from Fabiano.
No one making their move into their pits this time by. Miller did get out behind Chris Moretta, and actually the gap is much bigger than I thought it was. So much, in fact, that Chris Moretta is still on the lead lap, whereas Miller is a lap down. But kudos to Reed Miller, because he has been one of our regular contenders recently, a driver that always keeps showing up. And I almost wonder if we have a couple of drivers such as Ziegler or Andrews who don't show up in the closing couple of rounds, if Reed Miller might be able to break into the top 5 in points.
It's got to be a hard sell for Reed Miller to actually do that. He's currently sitting a few hundred points behind Clayton McLeod, but if he keeps showing up, and as well today P5, what it looks like he will get, it's actually a decent result for him. So he is at least moving himself up to the top 5 of the championship, and keeping half an eye on Thomas Seeger, on Scott Newton in front of him. Clayton McLeod, in the meantime, I think is uncatchable for Reed Miller in the championship and also in this race. He's currently leading coming into the pits. Now that means that Mark Usher once again will inherit that P1 position. Clayton McLeod will drop back 1 position to P2, but still will be quite away in front of Aaron Boutstra, who's still driving around in P3. Mark Usher is passing him now on the outside, back to P1, the UK&I driver. Clayton McLeod is stopping now in front of his crew.
This, of course, should put Reed Miller back out on the lead lap. Alright, so Clayton McLeod rolling now. We remember he wasn't too far ahead of Rootstra before this all started. That's Lima alongside him. Lima's lap down though. Rootstra is several seconds by McLeod now, which makes sense considering the hairy moments we've seen him having throughout this race. Must be said though, Owen's done a good job at being able to save a car when he's got it wrong, and he should still be able to put out a good podium finish here today.
Absolutely, and the gap between Clayton McLeod and Aaron Boutstra is only 7.6 seconds. So if Aaron Boutstra can just pick up the pace slightly, what he was doing at the end of his first stint, I wouldn't be surprised if slowly but surely he will close down the gap to Clayton McLeod and maybe put him under a bit of pressure before the race is over. Now, I think one battle that we have to keep our eye on in the race, though, Sam, is the battle for P6, the one between Fabiano Lima and Scott Newton. I mentioned a few laps ago that the gap is quite big. 37 seconds it is at the moment. But that 37 seconds is being closed down quite quickly. Last time around, Scott Newton was 2.5 seconds quicker than Fabiano Lima. This is a battle that's quite far apart, but Scott Newton sees the gap in front of him and also sees that it's just, well, closing down quicker and quicker. He's coming.
Yeah, he is coming. It'll take a little while to get there, but there's still several laps left in this race, being led currently by Mark Usher, with Clayton McLeod in second place ahead of Owen Woodstra in third, Chris Moretta fourth place, Reed Miller in fifth, Fabiano Lima in sixth, and Scott Newton in seventh. Now, barring any drama, none of those positions should change in a hurry. There's a pretty solid gaps between all of them, but as Johan just mentioned, we're going to keep an eye on the battle for second, because Clayton McLeod and Owen Woodstra only 7 seconds apart, and we saw early in the race Woodstra was able to catch McLeod and put pressure on him. He just wasn't able to get by him, and Scott Newton eating up chunks of time to Fabiano Lima could very well be a battle for sixth. It's worth noting now that the leaders have also pit that Scott Newton is back to only being 1 lap down, so that will make him feel a little better. As we mentioned, I think even though his beaching of a car was an unfortunate incident, I think he should be able to get to the end on fuel. Although the pit window was very tight today, almost makes me wonder if these cars are burning a bit more fuel than normal because of how long they're on the gas for going around the final corner. And maybe that would mean that Scott Newton might have to pit again. I hope that's... But we'll keep an eye on it.
We'll keep an eye on it. For incredibly close on the straight. You would almost say that Mark Usher would dive out a little bit earlier. Maybe the overdrive was a little bit higher than he expected. I also think that Reed Miller just maybe lifted off a little bit on the straight, and that created some confusion for Mark. So we go to a replay of that incident. Just look from the rear ring. That's where Reed Miller left off the gas a little bit, and Mark Usher suddenly had to completely swerve to the right to avoid him. Luckily for both drivers, they can continue. Mark Asher, however, is still leading quite comfortably in front of Clayton McLeod. The gap, even despite that moment, is still 17.6 seconds, so well enough in front of him. And it almost looks like 17 is the magical number, because there's 17 seconds between Mark and Clayton, between Clayton and Erwan, and between Erwan and Chris Moretta. So they're all keeping each other at an even bay at the moment. And funnily enough, Chris Moretta, not fun for Chris Moretta, but it must be a good feeling for Mark Asher. Mark Asher is actually close to lapping Chris Moretta. The gap between those two drivers on track is around 15 seconds. It seems like Mark Asher, well, last time around was around a second quicker than Chris Moretta. He's coming, and that would mean that the whole field is lapped, apart from the podium drivers.
Yeah, unfortunately, what Johan just mentioned there was correct, that the gap between Clayton McLeod and Erwin Woodstra is now about 17 seconds. It was only about 5 seconds a couple of laps ago. Woodstra had a bad lap. He must have made a mistake, had an off or something, and that cost him some time. Another driver who lost some time recently, Fabiano Lima, about a lap ago, had a spin going through the final corner as he was getting back on the loud pedal to go around the oval turn. He got it wrong, and of course what's significant about that, even though he hasn't lost any positions so far, is that's a massive chunk of time out of that gap between himself and Scott Newton will make Scott Newton's job of getting 6th place a little bit easier.
Just an update to what happened exactly with Erwan Boutstra. A few laps ago on the exit of turn 11, I think that is, or turn 10, he actually lost the car completely and actually hit the wall. Not very hard, and it was with his front nose, but he might have some damage, the Dutch driver. Now, of course, he lost around 11 seconds when that happened. He can still continue. He's not opting for a pit stop. That's actually a smart move from Erwan, I would have mentioned, because once he makes his pit stop, he will get passed by Chris Moretta, by Reed Miller, and he loses the 2 positions that he received in the race. But it seems like Boutstra will drive the rest of the race with a little bit of damage on his car. The gap between him and Chris Moretta is still 19 seconds, because luckily enough for Erwan, Chris Moretta still holds a little bit of damage as well, we suspect, after the first lap incident he had with Marcus Gestal and Clayton McLeod. And that means that Erwan Boutstra can just distance himself from him and consolidate the podium position that he currently holds.
Yeah, the other good news for Erwin Woodstra, you see right there at the bottom of your screen, he had a decent lap time last lap around, so as long as he can hold on to his car, it doesn't look like a front wing damage is affecting his race pace too badly, even if he runs a couple of laps a second or so off a pace. With only about 14 laps left to go in this race, he should be able to hold on to 3rd place ahead of Chris Moretta and round out our podium here today. So let's start talking, Johan?
Oh no, I wanted to say, talking about number 14, the gap between Fabiano Lima and Scott Newton is also down to 14 seconds. Scott Newton is actually making way quicker work of this time than I anticipated. Last time around, the gap between him and Fabiano Lima was around 1 second, or so he was around 1 second quicker than Fabiano Lima. But this time around, it seems like that deficit has grown to 2.5 seconds. So Scott Newton is really putting the hammer down, closing down to Fabiano Lima, and I'm actually trying to calculate if the speed difference of Scott Newton is enough to put him close to Reed Miller before the end.
We'll have to wait and see. Reed Miller currently holding 5th position down. But what I was about to mention is we haven't talked a whole lot about points today, and that's because unfortunately for Mark Usher's competition, things are obviously looking good for Mark Usher. He should be able to pick off another victory here today. However, in the long term of the championship, in the grand scheme of things, Mark Usher's damage has already been done by the fact that he missed many of the opening rounds. So if he were to get involved in the crash next week at Le Mans or our championship finale, he would lose a whole bunch of points. Whereas if someone like Clayton McLeod were to have a very bad race and finish, say he ran into trouble today and finished all the way back down in 7th, he could take that drop week and use these good point scoring results from all the other weeks that he's been here. Usher doesn't have that luxury, as Usher's about to come here and is this Moretti is about to put a lap on.
It seems like they're creaming across the last corner on the outside, swerving a little bit from left to right there, trying to find his way past He find his way past safety. But what you're saying, Sam, is absolutely true, and that's the thing that Mark Usher is probably thinking about a little bit in this race. At this moment, he's focused, trying to get that win, and it will be a good feeling for him that he actually gets that 6th win of the season. But he knows that even one mistake in a race, one contact like Marcus Gestel unfortunately had in lap 1, that could actually mean that Mark Usher goes from the main potential winner of the championship to someone who actually loses the championship. Any mistake that will be made from now on in the season will hurt him quite a bit, and he needs to be perfect like he is today if he wants to seal the deal and get the championship home at the end of the run.
So, with 10 laps left to go, the battle for 6 is the one we're keeping an eye on. So, like watching a lion chase a mouse, unfortunately, you kind of know that once the lion, Scott Newton, gets there, he's probably going to win the battle. The question is, will he be able to run the mouse down? And that's the worst metaphor I came up with this broadcast, so we're doing pretty good today, huh?
Absolutely. I'm looking at him. I was almost thinking it's more like a kangaroo chasing down an Arara Shuba at the moment with Fabiolina in front of him. Scott Newton, look at where they are on track. There's only one back straight between the two at the moment. Scott Newton is coming on the rundown towards turn 8 this is. This left, right section to set himself up for the start-finish straight. Now, last time around, Fabian Lima once again was in the 109s. He had a poor run a few laps before that, where he was a few times in the 112, 110s. That was not really helping him, but now he is in the 109s again. Actually did one of his quickest laps in the race. This time around, once again, a 110. So Fabian Lima losing a little bit of consistency in the latter parts of the race. Scott Newton, however, 108.1. That's basically very consistent. In the last 5 laps, Sam, Scott Newton has only done 108.2s and 108.1s. He is really, well, he's having a clear goal in front of him. And that's Fabiano Lima. He's very consistent in closing down the gap quickly.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate what happened to Kangaroo Newton, who's been hopping his way over the curbs earlier on during this race, because it was basically one curb that he couldn't hop over. That's cost him 2nd position today, if not even a shot at the win, considering the fact that he was never too far off of Mark Usher. A lot of drivers have made mistakes today. We've seen a lot of them going through the grass, going over curbs, locking up tyres. Just a shame Scott Newton's mistake was such a strange one. That's, he hasn't done worse than anyone else. That really is just a matter of getting a bit unluckier than his competition.
Yeah, absolutely. And that will also have big championship complications in the end, because I would imagine that Scott Newton at least would have finished P2 if he didn't have that spin and got beached on the outside of turn 2. Now he will finish P7 or P6 at the end of the race. Now, if you count that to championship points, that actually might be a difference of 60, 70 points once those get calculated. Now, if you look at the championship, with the 60, 70 points, he could have put Thomas Seeger, who's not here today, under pressure for P3 overall in the championship. With this poor result, Scott Newton will still be P4 as they go out of the United States, go across the pond to Le Mans next weekend. So Scott Newton, yeah, he will be happy to close down the gap, I imagine, to his competitors in front of him in the championship. But this is not what he wanted. He still had a long shot to the title. But with a mistake like this, I think that for the final remainder races of the season, he will look at Clayton McLeod and Mark Usher as the two people going for the championship.
Pressure's kind as now we finally see Scott Newton in the background riding off the back of Lima's rear wing here. The championship, the pressure is going to be on Usher really, Johan. Even though he is leading by all those points, he's got to keep this momentum going, because as we mentioned, any bad results he get are going to count, and that's not a good thing, the way the drop week system works, whereas Clayton McLeod's bad results might not necessarily count. So even though Usher has been absolutely dominant pretty much every time we've seen him this season, we've seen races where lap traffic can play a huge factor. Now, let's be honest, so on the flip side of that coin, Le Mans is probably the one track where lap traffic is something like, this doesn't bother me too much today.
Absolutely, and maybe that's one of the reasons that if there's one driver in the field that must have smiled when we saw 9 cars on the grid, is probably Mark Ascher, because with those amount of drivers, the chance of something random happening that interferes with your race is a little bit smaller. He knows that he's basically running qualifying laps out there today. He just has himself to trust to bring it to the end and get a good result. Scott Newton, however, he's trying to go for a better result. Look at the gap that he has closed down to Fabian Lima. I remember that after the pit stops we were mentioning that the gap was around 48 seconds. Well, it's less than 1 second now, only 7 tenths between the two, as he's closing down on Fabiano in the infield section.
Yeah, might be able to get him on the back straight here. They go through the left, they go through the right. Let's see if Newton's able to get a better run. No, he's going to have to wait to the front straight. We'll also have to wait and see what kind of fight Lima is going to put up against him. Don't know exactly the downforce levels of these drivers and who's going to have a better top-end speed here. Newton will obviously have a slipstream. Is he able to get a good exit out of a final turn? Yes, he is. He's going to have a really nice run on Lima here. Looks like the Lion's about to gobble the mouse up. But let's see what happens as they come off a banking to complete lap 41. And Newton has a run. He's going to look on the inside. And Lima is going defensive, going to squeeze him right up against the wall. Newton won't appreciate that, but he will appreciate 6th place if he can get it under braking much later on the brakes.
Very aggressive defending there from Fabiano Lima. Maybe we can go to a replay of how he was defending there, because it almost seems like he was determined to press Scott Newton into the pit wall there. He completely went to the middle, to the right side hand of the track there, trying to get that P6, trying to retain that P6 position. Here from on board you can just see how much he swerves, and Scott Newton actually gets really scared from that. Gives it a little wiggle there. Now let's go on board of the helicopter. Let's see how it looks from on board there, from on top of the track, above the track. You can really see nicely here how the driving lines are and how completely Fabiano was determined to keep that P6 position, pushing Scott Newton to the wall. Now luckily for Scott Newton, he could continue though. He could drive on, and he immediately put some distance between himself and Fabiano. The gap between them is currently 2 seconds. And I think that the closest battle on track is probably the one between Chris Moretta and Reed Miller. Not that those two drivers are seeing each other. The gap between them is 13 seconds. With 5 laps to go, I think that Chris Moretta has enough of a gap to consolidate P4 and finish in front of Reed Miller, even though he might have some damage.
Clicking off another lap now for our race leader Mark Ascher. 4 laps left to go in 4 minutes. Well, about 5 minutes actually. He'll get what he wants, the winner's trophy, if he can get through the rest of this race without making a mistake. Let's not forget the tyres are going to be worn. There's still traffic out there that could interfere with him. You mentioned how a small car count leads to less chances of incidents, Johan, but let's not forget the one highlight from the 2005 Indianapolis Grand Prix when Formula 1 raced here with only 6 cars. One highlight from that race was the 2 Ferrari teammates almost took each other out battling for the lead on pit exit. So you never know around this Indianapolis course.
Absolutely, you never know. But luckily that didn't happen though, because well, if the top 2 drivers would have taken each other out today, it would have been Clayton McLeod or Erwan Woudstra coming home with the win, and that would have been completely something. Luckily for that, that didn't happen though. We had a few retirements, of course, in the race. Chris Bean, he retired 35 laps ago. He parked his car into the pits, came out and basically gave up driving after that. Marcus Giasto, a few laps before that, already gave up. He had, of course, contact with Chris Moretta on the outside of turn 3 in lap 1. That was all she wrote for his Williams FW31 car. And with 3 laps to go, we're actually looking at several drivers, but let's once again maybe look a little bit at Erwan Woudstra, because he is one of the drivers making his debut today, and I don't think that he'll come home very disappointed here in Indianapolis. Sam, starting your race, starting your career here in Batteries Not Included with a podium result against drivers like Mark Ascher, against drivers like Clayton McLeod, like Scott Newton, that's a really respectable result from the Benelux driver. He is also one of the only drivers still on the lead lap, so it's a lot of pluses that Erwan can put in his pocket. I hope that he will return once again next week in Le Mans, and let's see what he can do there.
Yeah, he's made a couple of mistakes today, had a couple of spins. Some of those, I think, were caused by having to fight the turbulent air from behind Clayton McLeod's machine. Yeah, I'm sure he won't be too pleased about those mistakes, and, maybe he thinks he could have deserved second here today. But as you mentioned, third, they're definitely not something to be ashamed of. He's going to finish ahead of Chris Moreta in fourth place, who has had, he demonstrated impressive pace in practice and qualifying. Reid Miller in fifth place, he's been remarkably consistent. He's also going to say he beat Scott Newton on track. As, definitely a feather in his cap there. Even if it was from a bit of bad luck from Scott Newton, it's never bad to say that you beat a driver. It's always, it's a W that counts, right? Doesn't matter how you get it. And the W is what Mark Usher is going to be looking for very shortly, as he's about to come through the final turn. And normally in Formula 1 racing, I don't say take the white flag, because they don't do that. A white flag in road course racing means slow car ahead, but we're at Indianapolis. So, white flag for Mark Usher as he crosses the yard of bricks and puts the car a lap down once again, breaking into turn one for the final time. And Usher just a minute away from victory, barring any dramatic incident, holding over a 20-second lead over Clayton McLeod.
We mentioned it before, Mark Usher is probably very happy with his result here today at Indianapolis. He will just close down the gap to Clayton McLeod. Of course, he's still behind him if you don't count the drop weeks yet, because Mark Usher didn't make 4 of the 9 events, 10 events if you include Indianapolis earlier this season. But all the events that he raced in, he has won. And once again in Indianapolis, you can put check mark 6 to that box. So Mark Usher, the UK&I driver, he will be very happy coming home here from the brickyard.
And here he goes. He can keep his foot flat on the gas pedal now, using that inside lane he's been using the entire time. Mark Usher is going to pick up a victory here at Indianapolis.
Clayton McLeod behind him, I think, also will not be too unhappy with his results, because beating Mark Usher on any day is very difficult, and if you cannot beat him, well, P2 is a very good consolidation prize. He comes across the line around 21 seconds behind Mark Usher, but still very respectable in front of Scott Newton. Clayton McLeod brings home the silverware here at Indianapolis, and if we go a little bit further behind, it's Erwan Woudstra. We mentioned it before, the Benelux driver making his debut race here at Indianapolis, having some good fighting with Clayton McLeod. Of course, like you mentioned, Sam, some mistakes that he probably will be a little bit upset about, but still, coming home with a podium position on your debut race is not a bad thing. And look at him swerving, he is happy with it. Erwan Woudstra getting the bronze medal here at Indianapolis.
Well, that is going to wrap all the racing up here at Indianapolis. All of these drivers have already crossed the finish line, and Scott Newton, the last driver across the line, sets the fastest lap as he does so, 1:07.4. So feather in the cap there for Scott Newton. Hello and welcome back to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, where we just witnessed round and here we go. We'll give you a full race rundown. There was Mark Usher picking off another dominant victory by 20 seconds over Clayton McLeod in second place. This is the starting grid we have pulled up. It was Mark Usher winning, Clayton McLeod in second place ahead of Erwin Wooster, rounding out the podium finishers. Chris Moretta and Reed Miller finish a lap down in 4th and 5th. Scott Newton then 6th place. Fabiano Lima was 7th place, a couple of laps down. And then Chris Bean and Marcus Gresdal were our two finishers there today. So you can see how they differed from where they started on the starting grid. It was Marcus qualifying P1 and finishing P1. Another strong performance here today. We'll see if he can keep that momentum up next week at Le Mans, Johan, because if he can, that is definitely going to be a step in the right direction towards his championship efforts, as we mentioned a couple of times during today's broadcast. He's got to keep an eye, make sure that he doesn't lose out a bunch of points.
Yeah, it's difficult, of course, in this championship to know when you have done enough to seal the deal, because you have drop weeks to keep track of, but also you have different amount of points that you can win for a victory, because it's determined by how many drivers there are and what's the strength of field is. So you never know if Mark Usher, if he wins next week at Le Mans, actually has done enough to actually seal the deal. But if he wins next week, there will be 7 of his 8 counted races that he actually has won. I would almost say that if he wins next week, that's enough for Mark Usher to seal the deal and get a win here in the batteries not included championship. Today at Indianapolis, he at least put on a really good foot forward again. And 6 wins in 6 races, that's really, really good for Mark.
Yeah, we'll call up with one driver here. Scott Newton, do you have a copy? And his microphone is muted right now. We'll give Scott Newton a couple of moments. Is unable to. Oh, here we go. Scott, you got the copy?
Yeah, hey guys. Sorry about that. I was just leaving the server.
That's all right. Obviously, not the kind of race you were hoping for today. But besides for that mistake on lap 22, it seemed you had a very strong pace. So you got to hang your head high on that, I suppose.
Yeah, hey Sam. Yeah. Probably the most dejected I'll ever feel for P6. But qualifying, it was a bit of a toss-up whether to run medium downforce or high downforce. I chose the medium. But probably what cost me was in the race where I think was it Moretta? I don't know whether he got a jump start or whether he got a super launch, but that kind of could put me back in regards to where Mark Usher was, and then that little half spin at was it final corner before the run onto the oval. So that put me about probably 5 or 6 seconds back. And all the way up until lap 22, it was like the pace between me and Mark was pretty on par with each other. Like he might pull a tenth or two one lap, and then the next lap I might pull another 1 or 2 tenths back on him. So the gap was still relative to about 4.5, 5 seconds. But just when I felt the car go around on the bump of turn 1 for lap 22, but I tried all I could to get off the curb, but it wasn't meant to be. And just seeing Mark come past when I was taking that toe was a bit of a kick in the teeth, to be fair. But if there was one thing that I could take away from Mark today, was the fastest lap of the race, and thankfully I was able to do that in the final lap.
Yeah, we noticed that. Was that a goal you kind of set for yourself at the end on the final lap? You're like, all right, I'm getting this fastest lap.
Well, I knew that looking at Mark's pace, because on the timing app that I run, I could see his relative lap times, and he was within a tenth of 1 minute 7.7 each lap, and usually likes to pull a fastest lap out of the bag on the last lap. And I thought, why not? I'll just go for it. And I was even on my personal best up until the final corner before the run onto the oval. I think it's turn 8 or 9 or 10. And I got a really, really good exit out of there, and I managed to pull a 10th on the lap. So, yeah, to be honest, to be sub 1 minute 7.5, yeah, pretty happy.
All right, well, next week we go to Le Mans. Got 2 chances left for you to pick up a race win this season. You've already done it at earlier rounds, but wish you better luck there, because I know you've had a couple of rough goes at it with Donington last weekend with your spin today.
Yeah, cheers, Sam. Yeah, I'll book the dentist appointment early for next week, because yeah, that run onto the Mulsanne and all that's going to be quite bumpy. So yeah, I'm going to have to try all I can to maximize the top speed. But yeah, to get a win on Mark, it would have been the icing on the cake today. But yeah, I'll just have to try at either Le Mans or at Spa next for the final round if he decides to turn up. So yeah, I hope to see all of you guys there.
All right, well, that was Scott Newman. We got one more driver to catch up with. And Johan, you've called up with Clayton.
Yeah, Clayton McLeod is joining us in the booth. He, of course, came home in second place after starting in third. Clayton McLeod, welcome to the booth. I would almost say that you made the foundation, you built the foundation for your good result today at the start, because you had a blistering one compared to Scott Newton in front of you.
It was pretty lucky. I wasn't sure whether or not I had left him enough room in that first corner either, but I looked back at the replay and it wasn't too bad, but we still had a little touch there. I don't know how much of a difference it really made, because before he spun out and got beached, his pace was just too good, so I wouldn't have been able to keep up with him anyhow.
You come home with P2 in the end. After, of course, Scott Newton beached, it kind of seemed like a quiet run for you. How did you approach the race after that? Was it still a difficult one, trying to get concentrated and turn down your laps? Because for a while as well, you had some pressure from behind in the form of Erwin Woudstra.
Yeah, I still had to concentrate quite a bit, and I think maybe 3 times I almost lost the rear and had to put both feet in to keep it going straight. So it wasn't simple, that's for sure.
We were talking in the broadcast about the championship battle, which is basically now between you and Mark Usher, with 2 races left this season. How are you approaching it? Like, Mark has been on an incredible run, 6 races where he won 6 times. You have, of course, have been a lot more consistent than he is. How are you approaching it in the last 2 races? Do you go into those races with a different strategy, a different mindset?
No, well, I mean, raw pace, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to keep up with him anyhow. So about all I can do is just try and maintain some sort of consistency and try to eliminate any errors I can. Practice.
Well, you at least got a maximum out of it today. Congratulations once again with P2. Hope to see you again next week, Clayton.
Yep, thanks. Congrats, Mark. Good race, guys. See ya.
That's Clayton McLeod, our P2 finisher here at Indianapolis.
All right, so we would like to thank Clayton for coming here and talking to us, as well as Scott. Also, thanks, of course, to Clayton McLeod for putting on this league for us. And also, thanks to the iRacing Esports Network, who put this broadcast on for all of you guys to watch. And we appreciate everything they do. Be sure to subscribe to them. Thanks to all of the organisers and the competitors of the Batteries Not Included Championship for coming out today and putting on a great show. We would also like to thank all of the companies that provide the software and the hardware for our broadcasts, and there you can see them all listed on your screen. Additional thanks goes out to Eric Ekholm and June Lalonde to provide us with our music. See the screen for how to get hold of more of their great work. Thanks to the team today, Sean, Johan and Dougie. If you'd like to find out more about GSRC, you can visit us at globalsimracingchannel.com. We're also on Twitter at GSR Channel, and be sure to like us on Facebook and check us out on Instagram at GSRC_gram. All of the upcoming races for our other series are listed on screen, so be sure to check those out, mark them down in your calendar, and don't miss another second of exciting racing action. But until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.